The Way of Kings, Book 1 of the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. I recorded this entire thing once, it accidentally got deleted, and now I'm doing it again. Another hour and a half of recording. Yeah! Alright, so first thing I want to do is build this world a little bit. 4,500 years ago, there were a group called the Knights Radiant. Their job was to protect humanity from this dark evil force. We're not really sure what it was. They kind of got tired of doing it because they were immortals who just constantly fought, and they all kind of gave up their duty after this one last huge battle with whatever this force was. So now we cut to present times where there's kind of a racial, but eye-based racial divide, where light-eyed people are considered upper class, and dark-eyed people are considered middle or lower class. There is actually a third class as well called Parshmen. They are kind of humanoid, weird creatures that are mute and have no real personality. They just obey whatever people say, and they're treated essentially like pack mules. There's currently a war going on between another group of people called Parshindi, not Parshmen, Parshindi, though they look very similar, because the Parshindi hired an assassin to kill the king of all the kings of this kingdom. There's one big kingdom, a bunch of little kingdoms inside of it, and the king who presided over all of it was killed by an assassin sent by the Parshindi. Got it? Good. Because all the kings within that kingdom then decided to stop fighting amongst themselves, create a thing called the Revenge Pact, and go and take the war to the Parshindi. So they went to a place called the Shattered Lands and started invading the Parshindi homeland. The Shattered Plains are essentially a gigantic desert with pieces of land with giant cracks in between it. So to get across those cracks during a battle, you have to have a thing called you have to have a bridge brought in, usually carried by slaves. The war's been going on for quite some time, but there's these super soldiers on either side of the conflict that have things called shard blade and shard plate. Shard blades are essentially blades of people who own them, can summon them at any moment, and they cut through everything. Essentially think of a lightsaber, but the blade goes all the way through, and it is fairly physical. Shard plate, on the other hand, is armor that is essentially immune to everything. Even shard blades, it takes a lot to get through shard plate. They can almost like take a tank missile. They're pretty extreme. Typically, nobles have this. Shard blade and shard plate, if anyone, but it's not common among the nobles. They're considered the most valuable pieces of a thing for a person to have in this world. If a dark-eyed person gets either piece, their eyes will turn light, and they'll typically be brought into the upper echelon of society. There's this assassin in white who killed this king, this war is started, and that's where we pick up today, and that's with a young new recruit called Sen. Sen has been put into a new squad, and he's a fresh recruit to this group, and they're headed straight into battle. Sen's never seen battle before, and the head of this squad, a guy named Khaldun Stormblessed, has ordered his squad to protect this new young recruit at any cost. He does not want him dead. During the battle, Khaldun and his squad do really, really well. They manage to take no losses whatsoever, but they see a noble of the enemy army on a horse on a ridge, and they decide to go kill him. So they take the squad and they charge at this noble. They do successfully kill him, but a shard bearer of the enemy army arrives with a plate and weapon. And this shard bearer essentially wipes out Khaldun's entire squad, including the kid named Sen. He essentially just tramples him. That's where we leave off with Khaldun in the past, because we pick up with Khaldun in the present day. He is a slave in a slave caravan. We don't really know why this has happened to him, but there's a few rumors that are discussed. One, Khaldun killed a man he shouldn't have, or two, Khaldun is a deserter from the military he was fighting in. Khaldun meets a spren, or a small fairy-like creature that populates this world. There are tons of different kinds of spren. This one claims to be a wind spren named Syl, and it's rare for them to talk to people, but not unheard of. But Syl begins conversing with Khaldun. She asks him why he doesn't fight anymore for anything, and he responds to the spren, because I failed. So already we've kind of had Khaldun built as this character who's losing hope. The head of the slave caravan comes up to Khaldun and says, "You used to be a soldier in this area. I need your help. Look at this map and tell me where we are and where we need to be." Khaldun rips up the map and says no, kind of showing he doesn't really care if they die of dehydration in the desert. He just doesn't give a shit about anything anymore, period. But okay, Khaldun then learns the slave caravan is headed to the Shattered Plains where this massive war is happening. This gives Khaldun hope because he hopes he can join up with one of the militaries and start fighting in battle again and hopefully protecting people. From here we cut to our other main character, Shallan. Shallan is a young noble woman who we find out is chasing a very well-known and renowned scholar named Jasnah Kholin. Shallan really wants to meet up with Jasnah so that she can become her ward, or essentially her student in philosophy. We learn that Shallan kind of has ulterior motives for doing this. She wants to steal a soul caster from Shallan and use it to help bring her family from the brink of bankruptcy and actually being harmed. There's a lot of people threatening her family. Shallan does eventually catch up with Jasnah Kholin. Jasnah Kholin hears her out and initially says no. While Shallan is self-taught and very impressive in her knowledge, she has major gaps when it comes to philosophy and history. Shallan does continue pursuing Jasnah Kholin and eventually does convince her to let her become her ward because of her persistency, work ethic, and being so smart when she's just self-taught. Jasnah essentially says, alright, you're impressive, I'll let you be my ward. During this time, Shallan meets a young priest named Kabsol. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I'm going to keep pronouncing it. And Kabsol essentially talks to her about religion and faith and Jasnah's lack of it. This does bother Shallan a little bit, but not too much. And she kind of likes Kabsol, but he's also a little weird. We as the reader get a very weird vibe from the guy. At least I did. He does continue to talk about religion a lot. It's kind of a theme for his character. He's the religion guy. So now we're actually going to cut back to Khaldun. Khaldun arrives in the Shattered Plains and is immediately sold to a noble's army named Sadeas. Sadeas, we're going to learn very quickly, is not a good person, is one of the villains of the book. He tells the army that buys him he wants to fight for their military. Because they hear a rumor that he is a deserter, this is rejected. Instead, he's put in Bridge 4. He is now assigned to carry bridges, which is one of the worst duties a slave can have. It's also one of the highest casualty rates. Essentially, he carries a giant piece of wood over his head as he charges towards an enemy armory, and archers just continually fire at him. Now, Khaldun is assigned to Bridge 4, which is currently being watched over by a jackass named Gaz. They immediately do not get along, and because of that, Gaz puts Khaldun in the most dangerous position of the first bridge run, essentially right in the front where the archers will be aiming. He actually does pretty quickly go on a bridge run and realizes that his life will essentially be hell until he's one day hit by an arrow and dies, probably pretty soon. This isn't really a good time for Khaldun, and he's clearly not in a good mental state and is not getting better. Now from here, we're going to cut to Adolin and Dalinar. These are two nobles that we'll be following pretty closely. They are light eyes, but they're pretty good people. Dalinar and Adolin are out on a hunt with a few other nobles trying to kill a chasm fiend, which is a creature in the Shattered Plains that has a gem heart inside of it, a very valuable item worth a lot of money. So these nobles are out there trying to get this gem heart. We have some real character building here for Dalinar. He is a previous warlord. He used to be very bloodthirsty and known as one of the best generals in the battlefield, but he's gotten a little older, a little wiser, and this is actually kind of turning around for him. He's expressing a disdain for battle and a general just lack of motivation to even get gem hearts. He just wants peace, he wants unity, and he wants all this violence to stop. He's essentially just been overwhelmed with the level of violence in his life. He shows some wisdom here. He lets the new king of the kingdoms, the son of the king who died, and also his nephew, successfully kill the chasm fiend they're going after. This kind of makes the king feel good, puts Dalinar in his good graces, and it shows Dalinar's got some real intelligence to him, even though other nobles are making fun of Dalinar for not getting enough gem hearts, mainly Sadeas. There is another incident with one of these giant monsters out in the Shattered Plains where Dalinar single-handedly catches one of its legs as it's descending. These things are huge. It's a very impressive feat, and he's saving the king while he does it, also putting him even more in good graces. It shows that Dalinar, while he is kind of tired of all this, is still a very good fighter, a very physically capable person. I really like Dalinar. He's one of the more interesting, he's probably the most interesting character in terms of who he is for the entire book for me. Not Ark though, that's Khaldun. So now we're actually going to cut to Khaldun's past. We see him as a young boy, and it's established that he's the son of a surgeon. He is still in a dark-eyed family, but surgeons are definitely kind of more of a middle-class profession, and he is kind of more well set up than most kids in the village. His father is also training him to be a surgeon and wants Khaldun to do this. Khaldun actually wants to go off and be a soldier. Now, as we cut back to the present, we see Khaldun's going off to go kill himself. He's tired of being a slave, he's tired of life, he thinks he's failed in every aspect, and he's literally walking out to the shattered plains to jump into a chasm and just die. He even runs into Gaz on the way, and Gaz just kind of lets him go, not really caring, actually kind of giving Khaldun shit. As he gets to the chasm, Syl, the little sprin that's been falling around, stops him and goes, "Look, there's more people for you to protect. Your duty's not done. Suck it up and get back to work." This is a pretty interesting turn, and what ends up happening is on his way back to the camp, Khaldun beats the crap out of Gaz and has Gaz put him as the commander of Bridge 4. He also is going to start bribing Gaz to allow this to happen and to get a few other benefits from this. So now part of Khaldun's pay is going towards Gaz. Khaldun then goes back to Bridge 4 in their little barracks and firmly establishes dominance over them, physically throwing one of the guys outside of the barracks, and he orders them to start exercising every morning. That way, when they're carrying bridges, they'll actually be in decent shape, and be able to do a better job, move faster, and probably take less arrows. They don't really listen to him, though, and say no. Khaldun says, whatever, fine, and he starts working out on his own. Syl makes the point to Khaldun that she feels she's becoming more conscious and intelligent of the world around her and actually kind of evolving. Interesting change for her. Now we're going to cut to Dalinar. So Dalinar is actually looking into the fact that the king's saddle had a strap that appeared to be cut during the last hunt, and the king fell from his horse for that reason. As he goes to a few leather working men to ask, does this appear to be cut? And they're like, yeah, it does. That shouldn't have broke. And Dalinar is working to gain backing for the king himself. He's kind of pushing for unity. Dalinar asked the king himself if he can be made High Prince of War. That way Dalinar would be in charge of the entire war effort and would help move towards a kind of conclusion of the Revenge Pact. He does even float the idea of just kind of leaving altogether and giving up on this war. The king says no to the latter, but does say he'll consider making Dalinar the head of the war effort. Dalinar is headed back to his men when actually a high storm comes in. What's been happening is every time a high storm comes, Dalinar has fits, and during these fits has visions. He has one of these visions and fits in front of his men because he can't make it back to his place, so he has to stop in a barracks because you can't stay outside during a high storm, you'll die. During the vision, he's told that an alliance must be made or else something bad's going to happen. Dalinar has a bad issue in front of his men, but now he gets a clear message from some kind of foreign essence. He's not really sure if he should believe his visions or not. Now, Khaldun is continuing to lead Bridge 4. We're cutting back to him, and during another bridge run, he decides, I'm the leader, I'm going to run up front, and he takes a man from up front and puts him in the back, a more safe place, and now Khaldun's again volunteering to be in the most dangerous position. That man who he moves, name is Rock, and he'll become important later on. 4 men that were in front with Khaldun take arrows and are seriously injured. Khaldun, instead of leaving them to die as previously done, decides that we're going to start taking care of our wounded and demands that they actually help bring these wounded men back, which they do. This actually causes some controversy with the people higher up above him. They don't like this change, but Khaldun says he'll pay for it out of his own pocket and he'll watch out for these men. He asks Bridge 4 to give up some of their money and food to help take care of these men, and they kind of laugh him off and say no, but one man does step forward to help, and that's Rock, the man who he put in a more safe place on the bridge. Rock feels like he owes Khaldun. We cut back to Khaldun's past again, and we see him as a young kid helping perform surgery on a dying girl. He thinks he stops the blood flow, but in actuality the girl's heart just stopped beating and she died. Khaldun's father essentially gives him a lesson to this point, is as a surgeon you need to learn when to care and when not to. A pretty callous thing to tell a kid, but we kind of understand that Khaldun's father he's a good guy, but he's been through a lot, so he knows when to kind of shut it down. From here we cut to the nobles again. Now, Adolin and Dalinar are having some trouble with relationships. The king is very paranoid that someone did try to kill him by cutting that strap, and he doesn't think Dalinar is taking it seriously enough. So what ends up happening is the king appoints Sadeas, the high priest of investigation, kind of a snub to Dalinar asking to be High Prince of War, to look into the cut strap. Dalinar does propose an idea that him and Sadeas start doing joint assaults against the Parshendi, combining forces. This gives us a signal that Dalinar has some real faith in his visions that are kind of telling him to unite the people. He's willing to work with a guy who just snubbed him and who doesn't have the best reputation. Dalinar does believe in honor, though, and he does think Sadeas has some honor. When the first one of these joint attacks does happen, Delanar feels a lot of revulsion. You can tell he's just tired of war, he's tired of bloodshed, and in general just does not want to be in this situation. A big turn for someone who used to be known for what he used to be known for. Now, Khaldun, if we cut back to him, is really starting to gain some loyalty from Bridge 4. Some of them start listening to him and respect him, and it's because he's shown he cares and he's willing to fight for them. Delanar during this time has a conversation with Jasnah Kholin through a thing called a span reed, essentially a telephone that works through magic, and asks her to come out to the Shattered Plains because he could really use her advice. She's an incredibly renowned, thinker. So from here we cut back to Shallan. Now, the pressure on her is building. Her family's being threatened by this organization her father, before he died, clearly used to be a part of, and they really want the soul casting stone that her family used to have. To deal with this pressure, Shallan starts doing something kind of therapeutic she always does, and she's really good at, and that's drawing. She starts drawing and notices there's creatures in her drawing she does not remember intentionally putting there. This is really strange, and she kind of rips up and destroys the drawing. Shallan then decides, as a ward, what field of study to focus on, which is natural science. And she needs to kind of remind herself at this point that, look, she's here to steal something, not to actually learn. She has to keep reminding herself of this. She's not really sure if she even really can steal from Jasnah Kholin. She respects her so much. She has a conversation with the guy Kabsul again, who she kind of thinks this could be something romantic, but definitely decides no. The guy is way too into talking about religion for her, and he seems just kind of strange overall. We as the reader, especially I, just did not like him. He tries to bring up some kind of evidence for his religious claims, but even Shallan can kind of see through them as BS. But at this point, Shallan does decide she cannot steal from Jasnah Kholin. She just can't bring herself to do it. Jasnah Kholin, though, brings her out on a little trip into the city where she basically baits some guys into trying to mug or maybe kill them, and Jasnah Kholin uses the soul casting stone to turn them all into smoke and kill them. Point, Shallan decides, yeah, I can steal it because this woman's kind of a monster. I, as the reader, though, kind of felt Jasnah Kholin was maybe justified. Like, these guys were trying to kill her, and she just decided to kill them. It doesn't matter that she maybe went to a part of the city she shouldn't have gone to. That's not how society works. People should be able to go wherever they want to, and anyone who tries to harm someone should be punished. So I was with her the whole time. Shallan wasn't, though. Shallan is thinking about this event and doing some more sketching. Again, creatures appear in her drawings, which really bothers her. She does decide to actually go steal a soul casting stone after seeing Jasnah Kholin use it to murder, and she does replace it with the fake broken one that her family was using that she had. She actually tries to experiment with Jasnah Kholin's soul casting stone, but it fails and she is not able to use it, and she then wonders whether or not it's actually real. Actually going to cut to Khaldun. Now, all the members of Bridge 4 are at least starting to respect Khaldun and be loyal to him in some way because he's fighting and working so hard for them. Most of them are starting to actually begin to exercise and go along with what he's preaching, which is pretty cool. Now we cut to Gaz, the person in charge of Bridge 4, for a minute, and he's being told that Khaldun needs to die by his higher-ups. He doesn't want Khaldun to be murdered, though, because that would turn him into a martyr. So he needs to find a way to just kind of dispose of him. So now we cut back to Khaldun, and him and his men are practicing something called the side carry. What they want to do is actually run towards the Parshendi archers in a zigzag pattern, shifting the bridge to block the arrows as they do it. Sounds like a great idea on paper, and they actually do execute it. So as they're executing this during their next bridge run, they start putting it to the side and blocking arrows, and none of their men die. And they're in good shape, so they're able to keep a good pace and actually do make it to the Parshendi. The problem is, though, the Parshendi, after seeing how how effective the bridgemen were using this as a shield, decided to stop shooting at them and shoot at other bridgemen and the main army. This is not what bridgemen are supposed to do. Other bridges also tried to emulate what Bridge 4 was doing, and they failed because they weren't in as good shape and didn't practice, so they ended up getting massacred. This means that Bridge 4 single-handedly kind of ruined an assault against the Parshendi. As Bridge 4 gets back to Sadeas's camp, Khaldun has all the blame put on his shoulders, and he is severely beaten and sentenced to be left out, hung by his heels in a Heimstorm. It's kind of a religious execution because if you're deemed to be worthy, the Stormfather will save you, but in reality, everyone thinks he's going to die. Bridge 4 even comes out and says their goodbyes to him. Rock comes out and gives him an infused stone, which is supposed to be a good luck charm, and puts it in Khaldun's hand, and he's essentially left out to die in the storm. Now, the storm does hit him. It throws him around a lot, incredibly high winds, battering him with sand. Your average person would absolutely die from this. The next day, Rock and Taff, another member of Bridge 4, come out and check on Khaldun and see he has managed to survive because his eyes snap open. One other thing that they notice is the soul stone that Khaldun had has been drained, the opposite of what should happen, because when soul stones are left out in high storms, they typically gain their glowing ability. But Khaldun seems to have drained it somehow. This is our first hint that Khaldun has some real magic up his sleeve. We've cut to Khaldun's past at this point, and we see that the town is actually kind of turning against his father a little bit and really does not trust him as a surgeon. There's a lot of different reasons for this, but there's also some accusations of theft of some money of one of the men who died at Khaldun's father's table. Khaldun then expresses to his father a desire to fight as a soldier and not be a surgeon, but Khaldun's father says, no, you're not going to do that, you're going to be a surgeon, and there's kind of an argument. It is also revealed during this time that Khaldun's father did actually steal the money he was accused of stealing. Now, as we see Khaldun recovering in a tent from being left out in a high storm, he is surrounded by death spren. These are spren that kind of bring people to death. But Syl has a little tiny sword Khaldun sees as he's fighting off fever and trying to stay conscious, fighting off these death spren. Syl's amazing. I love Syl, and seeing her literally fight off death spren to keep Khaldun alive is really great. Taft has a theory, and he puts a bunch of infused stones on Khaldun's chest while he's healing. And he notices that Khaldun then heals very quickly and all the stones get drained. So Khaldun is able to definitely pull something from these infused soul stones. When Khaldun finally does heal enough and have enough energy to get up and go outside, he sees that Bridge 4 is still training even though he's not even there to lead him. That is an awesome sign of their loyalty to him, their respect for what he's doing, and their belief in what he's trying to help them do. We're going to cut to Shallan again. Now Shallan and Jasnah Kholin are having a debate whether or not those killings were justified. Shallan says no, they weren't, and won't really budge, and neither will Jasnah. But by the end of it, Jasnah Kholin admits she respects Shallan's ability to argue and her moral standpoint, which is a cool thing to see Shallan kind of have this gaining respect from her mentor. Now, Kobyl comes in, and he actually starts talking with Shallan, and they don't get along as well as they did, and they both kind of talk about the soul casting stone and their desire to have it. She does try to draw Kobyl at this point, but creatures do appear in that drawing as well, and she tears them up and is freaked out and really doesn't like this, and actually feels like she's being pursued by the creatures as she runs from the room. She actually summons a shard blade at this point, and we as readers now learn that somehow Shallan has a shard blade, one of the most powerful weapons in the world, if not the most. She ends up using the soul casting stone as well while doing this, and kind of trips balls and travels to other dimensions and see all kinds of weird stuff. But she ends up transported back to her room, blood everywhere, and it's not hers, and Jasnah Kholin is outside her door knocking, saying, hey, what's going on? Why'd you run? All this stuff. And Shallan, to cover up for this, ends up cutting herself to make it look like the blood came from her, and this certainly looks like a suicide attempt. Now, the next time we see Shallan, she is on suicide watch, because it clearly looked like that. She's in a hospital. She's visited by Jasnah Kholin, who apologizes to her for basically pushing her too hard. I mean, Jasnah Kholin's not really used to apologizing, and it kind of comes through here, and she's especially confused on what exactly went wrong. She thought Shallan was fine. Kobyl also visits during this time and tries to get Jasnah Kholin, her, and Shallan to eat some bread and jam he brought. Shallan ends up eating just the bread and no jam, and then Kobyl basically forces jam down her throat and then tries to run from the room. He falls over dead from poison, and it turns out he was trying to poison Jasnah Kholin, and the reason he tried to shove jam down Shallan's throat was that was the antidote. During this poisoning attempt, Shallan is dying, and Jasnah Kholin tries to use her soul casting stone to save her, but it's the fake that Shallan replaced it with. So Shallan upends her pouch, having the real one fall out so Jasnah Kholin can save her, but now she's been caught with the real soul casting stone. Shallan regains consciousness. Jasnah Kholin basically confronts her, asks her who hired her to steal her soul casting stone, but Shallan tells the truth and says, I did it on my own to save my family, and I'm really sorry. Jasnah Kholin expresses her extreme disappointment and essentially says, you're no longer my ward, and you will never be anybody's ward because you are a thief. Cut to Khaldun. Khaldun's not in a good place. He basically realizes that bridge men are not supposed to live. They are targets to be shot at by the Parshendi so that the real soldiers don't die. They are expendable, and no matter how hard he tries, he can't save his men. He can only delay their death. In addition to that, Bridge 4 has been assigned to chasm duty. What this means is they have to go down into the chasms between the blocks of land, which is very dangerous, and try to loot dead bodies of soldiers that fell into the chasms to try to get supplies for their army. Now, while down there, Khaldun decides, we're going to live, I'm going to train my men to fight and survive, and we're going to escape. Now, this is obviously a long time coming. This needs to happen, and Bridgemen are all for it, and Khaldun begins training them how to fight and survive. Now, we cut to past Khaldun from here when he's still young, and we see that a new noble who's come in to lead the town that he lives in is one engaged to Khaldun's kind of crush, which is an adult engaged to a child, and of course the noble's a Light Eyes, so this kind of sparks a hatred in Khaldun. In addition to that, a draft has been called for sons to come into the military. Now they draw names, and Khaldun's brother is on the list. Then Khaldun immediately volunteers to go and fight as well, because he does not want his brother going off to die and have no one there to watch his back. So Khaldun promises his parents one day he will bring back his brother. Of course, his parents are devastated because now both of their children are been drafted into the military. We briefly cut back to present Khaldun. He's walking through Sadeas's camp, and he sees a prostitute being beaten by a noble. This really upsets him because he knows that Light Eyes just always behave this way. Then he sees another Light-Eyed noble step in and stop what's happening, and this other Light-Eyed noble is actually Adolin, Delinar's son. And Adolin even goes so far as to escort the woman out of the camp. He tries to pay Khaldun to deliver a message for him. Khaldun actually takes the money but refuses to deliver the message because he still does definitely not like light-eyed nobles. From here, we're going to cut to past Khaldun again. Now, we learn that Khaldun's time in the military is about to be up, but he goes ahead and signs a contract to re-enlist. The reason he does that, we find out, is he failed to protect his brother, and his brother died. And Khaldun can't stand the idea of facing his parents again. This is already many years later, but Khaldun is a hardened veteran of fighting, and we see he has immense respect among his men and an incredible skill in fighting. He's known as Khaldun Stormblessed. Now, we even see this start picking up where the beginning of the book was. Khaldun sees a new recruit who clearly doesn't know what he's doing, and goes and bribes an officer to have that recruit put into his squad, this recruit being Sen. Now, we see Khaldun save Sen's life during this battle, and basically the same fight happens again, and except we see the result of the Shardbearer coming in and murdering all of Khaldun's squad except for 4 men. Khaldun ruthlessly attacks the Shardbearer, desperately trying to save his men, manages to get his spear in between the eye slits of the Shardplate armor, and kill a Shardbearer. Khaldun should take the armor and blade and become a Light Eye at this point, but his hatred for Light Eyes is already pretty well established, and this armor was just used to kill a whole lot of his friends and the blade as well, and he can't bring himself to pick it up, and he says no. Here, we learned the truth about how Khaldun really became a slave. The head of the army that Khaldun was working for, Amaram, calls Khaldun in to a meeting after Khaldun turned down the shard plate and blade. Now, Amaram is one of the only light-eyed people that Khaldun respected, because he does been a pretty fair leader to this point. Amaram asks Khaldun, why did you turn it down? And Khaldun essentially says, I don't know, because he doesn't want to tell him the truth about his revulsion for what the armor does. Amaram, as a noble, doesn't have his own armor, and so what he decides to do is he kills Khaldun's 4 remaining men, and he tells Khaldun, I need this now. You're eventually going to change your mind and come back for it. I know you will, which Khaldun wouldn't. We as the reader know that, but Amaram doesn't. And he says, I'm the better fighter to begin with. And with this, I can go to the Shattered Plains and be a fighter in the real war. He's going to then sell Khaldun into slavery because he admits Khaldun has saved his life before, and he does owe Khaldun, so he won't kill him, but he'll spread the rumor he's a deserter and sell him into slavery. And this pretty much cements Khaldun's current position and his general hatred for all light-eyed people across the board. Here we cut to a brief discussion between Adolin and Delinar, his father. Basically, Delinar says he wants Adolin to take over the kingship of the country they preside over, and Adolin says, look, no, you're fine, just please ignore the visions, they aren't real, you're still a great leader. And Delanar's response is essentially, let me go have this vision. And then from here we cut back to Khaldun. He tells Bridge 4, yes, we're doing this training. In addition to that, we're also going to start rescuing the wounded from other bridges, are essentially being left to die. This will, 1, give Bridge 4 more members, because they're then going to be inducted into Bridge 4, and 2, just kind of shows Khaldun's incredible desire to want to protect people. Now, whether this is too much for him is yet to be seen, because he is taking on one hell of a task while he's doing this. Delanar and Sadeas during this time have actually agreed to do a joint assault together on the Parshendi. It's the first time this has ever been done, so seeing 2 armies come together to fight the Parshendi is pretty interesting. Now Khaldun actually watches this battle happen of these 2 joint armies attacking the Parshendi, and it goes incredibly well. And so this might become a more common thing to be occurring. During the joint assault, though, Delanar really is revolted by the battle. He hates the fact that he's killing. He kind of kills a really young Parshendi, and it really disturbs him. So we see Delanar just really wanting this to be over with. Again, this is being reiterated to us. During the battle, though, Sadeas almost dies, and Delanar in his shard plate comes in and saves him. This is actually cementing a more maybe stable relationship between the two. Sadeas, though, says, look, Delanar, one day your honor is going to get you killed. Now we cut back to Khaldun. He's having a conversation with Syl, and Syl tells Khaldun, I'm not a wind sprint like I told you, but I don't remember what I actually am. My relationship with you has helped me evolve. I'm changing into something else, more aware of the world around me and more understanding. Khaldun is beginning to admit that he has some powers that he doesn't fully understand, and he begins training with them a little bit. He knows he can heal, and there's some hints of maybe some other abilities as well. Now, Delanar at this point is having more visions, and he's more and more convinced that they're real. He starts having a relationship with his dead brother, the King of Kings' ex-wife. It is kind of a social moray to date your brother's widow, but they kind of admit their relationship for each other, and I'm really against that. I think that's weird, but hey, they love each other, whatever. Her name is Navani, and she is a very strong, very intelligent person who has really helped guide Delanar down the path he's going. So the relationship between the two is healthy and cool to watch. Khaldun starts putting on weapons and armor from dead Parshendi during bridge runs. This infuriates the Parshendi who see it, and they kind of focus fire on him. Now, because he has a shield and maybe some abilities with this soul gems and energy manipulation, he's able to pretty much redirect or take all the arrows, preventing any more men from Bridge 4 of ever really dying, except for on rare circumstances. Now, another joint assault happens with Dalinar's army and Sadeas's, and so this assault kind of relies on Sadeas's bridges to get to a chasm both the armies slam into a Parshendi army of about 10,000. It's an absolutely insanely huge army. Delanar and Sadeas are doing pretty well. They're managing to fight down this huge Parshendi army, but out of nowhere, another Parshendi army is able to flank Delanar, and he's confused because Sadeas should have been on that side and seen it coming and been able to prevent it. He gets to a vantage point to see what's going on with Sadeas and his army, and he sees that Sadeas and his army has retreated across their bridges and is now withdrawing their bridges so that Delanar and his army cannot retreat. This is a huge betrayal, and it's essentially Sadeas leaving Delanar to die. When Sadeas gets back to the camp, he tells the camp that unfortunately he saw Delanar fall in battle and he had to retreat before he was overwhelmed. We know this to be BS, but it's what he says. Cut back to the battle. Khaldun's retreating with Sadeas' army, but he sees what's happening. Fortunately, him and Bridge 4 had a kind of rough run during this time, and they're already really hurt, but he kind of rallies his men and he says, look, we have to go help them. Turns around and charges to put a bridge back in place to help Delanar and his men escape. They successfully get there due to Delanar and his army distracting the Parshendi and taking out a lot of their archers. They manage to hook up the bridge, and Khaldun leads a charge with Bridge 4 up the bridge and starts holding a bridgehead so the Parshendi can't come down. Delanar and his army manage to try to fight their way towards the bridge. During this time, Khaldun's kind of single-handedly holding off an army, and some of the men in Bridge 4 note that he's glowing with energy. Now, we know Khaldun has some really serious abilities at this point, because apparently he's moving almost faster than eyesight. Delanar and his men manage to fight their way through the Parshendi army, get to the bridge, and retreat back down. Delanar and Khaldun talk briefly, Delanar expressing his extreme gratitude, and says he will buy Bridge 4's freedom from Sadeas, and they start heading back to camp. Now, if we cut back to camp, Sadeas is kind of still telling everyone, oh, Delanar's dead, it's so sad. But messengers arrive from Delanar's army saying, no, we're alive, and I want to have a talk with Sadeas. Delanar comes into Sadeas' camp and they're pretty cordial with each other until they get up close. And Delanar says in a tone that only he and Sadeas can hear, why? Sadeas says, look, I told you your honor would get you killed one day. In addition to that, this king's a fool and needs to die. And so Sadeas wants this king to end up dead and probably more power for himself. Delanar kind of says, all right, and you see Delanar just kind of lose all faith in Sadeas as a person. As Sadeas is walking away, though, Delanar says, wait, I'm going to buy this bridge crew from you. Sadeas says, I wouldn't sell them to you under any circumstances, and we as reader know that Sadeas is planning on killing Bridge 4 for their betrayal. Delanar offers an exuberant price, but Sadeas says no to it, and then Delanar offers his own shard blade. Sadeas does not have a shard blade, he only has shard plate. So Sadeas agrees to this and calls Delanar a fool for giving up his shard plate for just a few men, a few slaves. Delanar walks away, and that's the end of that. It's an amazing thing to see a noble give up his shard blade for a few slaves. He actually has a bit of a conflict with the king at this point. He is in shard plate as well as the king, and essentially beats the king out of his own shard plate, ripping him apart. This proves he could kill the king right then and there if he wanted to. He's also next in line for the throne. But instead he asks the king, did you cut your own saddle strap? The king says yes. So Delanar has just demonstrated, I could kill you right now, I'd be king, but I'm actually just trying to get this resolved. The king says yes. Delanar says, I don't care what you say, I'm going to be the High Prince of War, and I'm going to end this conflict, and leaves the tent. Pretty much in a very aggressive way, proving his loyalty to the king by not killing him when he had the chance. From here we actually cut to Salam. She is very sad she's been cut off from Jasnah Kholin and is no longer her ward because of the theft she attempted to do, but what she ends up doing is finding Jasnah Kholin one last time and accusing her of not having a real soul casting stone. And Jasnah Kholin goes, that's kind of dumb that you would say that, and proves it by linking the two. I don't remember exactly how that scene goes, but that's my loose memory of it. When they have this link, Salam admits to have killing her own father. That's how she got the shard blade. This is a pretty big revelation. Her and Jasnah Kholin have a heart-to-heart, and eventually they kind of agree to work together. Salam is her ward again, and what they're going to do is essentially just seek truth. That's their number one mission, is to seek the unfiltered, unbridled truth of the world and the political situation they are currently in. Now we're going to cut to Szeth, S-Z-E-T-H. This is the assassin who at the beginning of the book killed the actual king. He, throughout the book, has been killing more lesser kings and nobles throughout the actual remaining kingdom, not over in the Shattered Plains, but in the homeland. There's one last king on the list of people he's been hired to kill. And as he goes to kill this king, the king then reveals, I'm the one who actually hired you. The reason my name is last is so that I could meet you when you were done, but no suspicion would fall on me if you were captured. Szeth, S-C-T-H, does not like killing, and he hates the fact that he's been doing all these horrific things. But through his contract and his upbringing and way of life, he has to obey what he's being told. And this king shows him a massive room filled with people who are slowly being drained of their blood and brought closer and closer to death, because this guy who hired Szeth believes that people close to death bring truth and have an unfiltered view of something. So this is kind of a horrifying thing to see. We're kind of left as readers being sympathetic towards the assassin who hates what he's doing, hates the person who hired him, but has to keep going. So now we cut to Khaldun, who's waiting to have a meeting with Delanar. Delanar meets with him, and Khaldun essentially asks him, why did you give up your shard blade for just me and my men? And Delanar says, you and your 20 men saved thousands that day, and my life, and so I am forever in debt to you. I would give more if I could. Like, that's the general message of their conversation. And then Delanar asks Khaldun to be the head of his bodyguard, as well as making Bridge 4 his actual protectors, because they showed so much honor and ability during that fight. Khaldun agrees to this, and is then now gone from lowly slave to head of a king's bodyguard in a day. Not bad. And out of gratitude, Delanar even gives Khaldun his cloak. Khaldun then goes to Bridge 4 and tells them what they just were given, and he gives them the option to either join up as bodyguards or leave. He won't make them stay. I think every single one of them agree to stay and be a bodyguard to Delanar, and then they all take an oath of silence on Khaldun's abilities and powers. Khaldun does not want his ability to be known and other people to start question and investigate what's going on with him. The same voice is telling him to unite the nobles, and then he starts having a discussion with a man. He quickly realizes this is essentially a recording. He can't really interact. He's just listening to what this man is saying. This man is saying that the evil is coming back. Dalinar must rebuild the Knights Radiant, bring that force back. In addition to that, the man talking to Dalinar claims to have been God, killed by someone named Odium. That is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, Book 1 in the Stormlight Archive. I hope you all enjoyed my summary. Please like and subscribe if you have not already. This is the second time I've done this entire recording, so hopefully it paid off and y'all enjoyed it. Have a great day. Peace.